everyone. This is the Podcast Guesting Masterclass, and I am so excited to be with you this week. I will be teaching this masterclass live on Zoom, and you will have access to the replays for 8 days after today. So, September 17th, that is a week from tomorrow. So, Tuesday, September 17th at midnight is when the replays go away. So, make sure that if you're not able to attend any of the sessions or you have to hop off early and you want to watch the replay, Tuesday, September 17th at midnight is when the replay page is removed and you will no longer have access to these amazing sessions. We will be doing the free microphone draw at the end of today's session. Session one is usually about 30 to 45 minutes. So right after this session, that's how we'll end today's video. So if you're excited, I've got the random name picker open on my computer. So we will be picking the winner of that. And we are going to do it again tomorrow. So if you don't win today, we're going to do another microphone draw on session two. So make sure you come back for session two. Either way. All right. My name is Jessica Rhodes, and in 2013, I founded Interview Connections, which was the world's first ever podcast booking agency. Shortly before starting what has become an entire industry, I was working for an environmental nonprofit organization leading their door-to-door field canvas. And when I found out I was going to become a mom for the first time, I put in my notice and decided that I would be staying at home when the baby came. My husband also, he works in nonprofit, was and still does. And so I knew I had to bring in income. I didn't have the luxury at that time to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. So I called up my parents and I said, this is my plan. What do you think I should do? And they fully supported my desire to be a stay-at-home mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. They absolutely loved that I wanted to put my family first. And so my dad, who has been an entrepreneur since I was 13 years old when he started his business, told me about being a virtual assistant. He said, you could start a virtual assistant business. It's your own business. You set your own hours. You can provide so many different types of services to entrepreneurs. And he said, you know what? I'll be your first client. And so I said, sure. So my dad was my first client. And in addition to a lot of different VA tasks, client support, sales, social media tasks, he asked me to book him as a guest on podcasts. Again, this is 2013. This is over a decade ago. So if you think podcast guesting and podcasting is a new strategy now, just imagine what the world was like 11 years ago. I started booking my dad on podcasts, and that is how I got into this whole world. I dove into all of his books about online marketing and business and very quickly got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. And so, as I was pitching and booking him on podcasts and doing some other VA tasks for him, I really had that desire to not just be an hourly VA that's making $15 an hour as a 1099 contractor. Yes, I could set my own hours, but it really wasn't a path to wealth. I asked my dad, how could I really become a business owner? Like, how could I really scale as an entrepreneur? And he asked me some questions. He's really was my first business coach. He's always looking, for opportunities to coach me. And so he helped me come up with the idea to create an agency around this VA service that I was offering, podcast booking. And so that is the start of Interview Connections. So interviewconnections.com then went live in the fall of 2013. I went from being a general VA who would offer this as an hourly service to having packages, and now over a decade later, we have served over 800 clients. We've booked over 30,000 interviews. We have 11 full-time employees here in Rhode Island. And so what I am teaching you in this masterclass about podcast guesting is, it's not theory, it's not information that I've regurgitated from other experts or from books that I've read. I'm really teaching you what we have learned from over a decade of experience booking over 30,000 interviews, helping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients leverage podcast appearances to grow their established 6, 7, and 8 figure small businesses. And we are honored to represent entrepreneurs who truly understand the value of staying in their zone of genius and who want a high touch concierge level service that gets them booked on podcasts and supports them in the strategy for monetizing. So that is a service that we offer. That is what we do. We are offering a discount, $1,000 off, and several bonus gifts for those of you who sign up and become a client during this masterclass. So if that calls to you, you want to learn more, you can actually book a free call with me right now at interviewconnections.com/call. So we'll put that link below the video in the chat here. So if you're interested in learning more about becoming our client, you can book a call at interviewconnections.com/call. Okay, let's check in. As an established business owner, I have a question for you. Why aren't you yet consistently appearing on podcasts as a guest? So, we recommend at least 3 interviews per month as a podcast guest to really see the value and the benefits of podcast guesting. So, if you're not yet getting interviewed on at least 3 podcasts a month, what is holding you back? Put it in the chat right now. I want to know, what is holding you back? Do you not know how to get started? You just haven't booked in the time. You didn't even know this was a strategy until you saw our ad. Like, why aren't you yet getting interviewed on podcasts at least a few times per month? So, not sure how to get started, lack of connections. This is very new, it's time consuming. Discovering the right niche podcasts. Um, don't know how to get started. It's new. Perfect. More of a B2B business. Okay, good. So just recognize what has held you back so far. Like, what has been in your way? Obviously, you're in the right place. You're at the podcast guesting masterclass. So I want to clear up anything that has held you back from moving forward with consistent podcast guesting. New niche, not sure how to get connected. All right. So if your answer was not sure how to get started, not sure how to get connected, we're going to remove that block right now. Okay, so I do recommend taking notes in this masterclass. So I am very actionable, I'm very fluff free. By the time you are finished watching this masterclass, you're going to know a lot about podcast guesting, but if you don't write it down, you'll lose access to the replays, you're going to forget it. So take notes. This is not a long masterclass. It's 3 different sessions plus a bonus session on Friday, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Each session is 30 to 45 minutes, no more than an hour. So it's not like I'm going to be rambling on with all of these tangential stories for hours and hours. So I'm going to be giving you actionable information. Take notes, write down what resonates with you the most so that you can be in action. Quick overview of the session. So these are 3 separate sessions. So today I'm going to teach you how to lay a strong foundation for your podcast guesting strategy. There is a big demand in podcast guesting. Thousands of people want to be booked as a guest on podcasts, but most have no idea how to stand out as a podcast guest. And just to give you some context, there are over 2,000 people registered for this masterclass. And that is only a small subset of the people in the entire world who want to be interviewed on podcasts who didn't find their way to this workshop. So there might even be millions of people that want to be interviewed on podcasts. So there's a lot of people that want to be interviewed. And there's only so many podcasts that are a good fit for each person. So we're going to teach you today how to really stand out as a podcast guest and lay a strong foundation for your strategy as a guest. Tuesday, session 2, we're going to talk about strategies for monetizing. So the topic of tomorrow's session is how to monetize your podcast appearances. This is the money session. I will teach you the exact strategies that our clients use to close new sales from their interviews on other people's podcasts. So to give you a quick example, our client Christina Woods is an empowerment coach. She's a clinical hypnotherapist. She's had multiple podcast hosts become her client. She's had hosts refer their family members to work with her, and she's had listeners become her client. I will tell you exactly what strategy she implements to generate those types of results. So if you want new clients as a result of being a guest on podcasts, you need to be on the right shows. You need to deliver great interviews as a guest. Then you need to execute the strategies that I'll talk about in session 2. And again, we're doing another microphone draw in session 2. So I'll be doing the draw for session 1 at the end of today's session, and then we'll do it again tomorrow. So make sure that session 2 is also on your calendar. It is going to be the same Zoom link as today's session. And then on Wednesday, session 3, that is going to be a Q&A. So we are going to have a panel of several Interview Connections clients who will share with you their unique businesses, their story, why they got started with podcast guesting, what the experience has been like for them, and what the results have looked like. So if you want to actually see who are the types of clients that work with Interview Connections and get some of your questions answered from myself and our clients, come to session 3. Same time, same Zoom link. And then lastly, we do have a bonus session. So this is by application only. This is a bonus session that will teach you how to repurpose your podcast interviews to create exponential visibility online. So just give me a yes in the chat if you want to learn how to repurpose your interview content. If you need more content to post on social media, give me a yes. If you're saying yes right now, go to interviewconnections.com/Friday, interviewconnections.com/Friday, and apply for the bonus session. You will absolutely love the bonus session because I'm going to give you over 10 strategies for repurposing your podcast appearances into content that you can use in your marketing plan. So interviewconnections.com/Friday. All right. So all sessions again are going to be recorded. They're live here on Zoom, and then they're going to be emailed to you, texted out to you, messaged to you, however we can find you. We're going to get you these sessions so you can watch before the replays are removed on Tuesday, September 17th at midnight. All right, let's get started. Who's excited to learn about podcast guesting? Give me a yes in the chat. It is Monday and we are here to learn about podcast guesting. So let's get started. So there is a very basic factor missing from a lot of people's podcast strategy that may actually surprise you. And it is the biggest reason they are not seeing sales from their podcast appearances. And that is they never set a goal for why they want to podcast guest. It's so simple, but most people go right into a strategy without ever setting a goal. And then when it wasn't successful, they blame some other factor. If you want to have success with podcast guesting, you have to set a clear goal for why you're doing it. What does success look like for you in this strategy? And we have clients achieving all kinds of results and meeting all different types of goals from podcast guesting. So it's not one size fits all. Some examples of goals that are very realistic to achieve through podcast appearances are number one, increased brand awareness. So you could have a goal that is, I need to increase my brand awareness. Not enough people know about my company. I need to get it out there. I want to increase my brand awareness. So that is number one. Number two, more warm, qualified leads. So tell me right now, just write ads, ads in the chat if you have a paid advertising strategy already in your business. You're running Meta ads, you have Google ads, you are already doing some type of paid advertising to generate leads. So if you're using a paid advertising strategy, you may find that a small percentage of your leads are qualified, or they're qualified, but they're very cold. They're good leads, but they're like, I don't know who you are. I saw your ad for 2 seconds, but I'm not ready to work with you because I don't no trust in you. So if you're running ads and you're finding that they're either very cold leads or they're not super qualified, you can have a goal to get more warm, qualified leads with podcast interviews, because when people hear you interviewed on a podcast, they are much more qualified because they're hearing you on a podcast that they have chosen to listen to that is relevant to both you and their business. And they're coming to you after that interview already having heard you speak for 30 to 45 minutes, which is so much longer than the time that they spent looking at your ad, which is probably a few seconds, maybe a few minutes if they ended up on a landing page that they read through. So if you have a paid ad strategy, podcast guesting, your goal could be to get more warm, qualified leads. Your goal may be to get more high ticket clients. So let me know in the chat, just put high ticket. If you sell something high ticket, you're a coach, you're a consultant, you're a financial planner, you're an investor, you're an agency owner, you have a service where you're selling something that is multiple thousands of dollars at a minimum. Okay, perfect. Lots of high ticket entrepreneurs here. We are a high ticket service as well. We're selling a service that, our clients are committing to work with us for, 10 to 12 months, and it's high ticket. And so your goal could be to attract more high ticket clients. And What is a high ticket client? Well, it's somebody that has a lot of trust. They're really serious. They're committed. They really want to solve the problem that your service solves. And so when you're interviewed on podcasts, you're able to fully educate the audience on how you solve problems, what your track record of success looks like, what types of people you've served in the past. And so high ticket clients really want to feel that connection. They want to feel like they really trust you and that you are the person for them. They're not price shopping. They're not looking for the lowest, the commodity offer. They're looking for the right fit. And so when they hear you on a podcast, they're like, you are for me. I'm not even shopping around. I don't care if there's somebody that's cheaper because you're the person that's for me. That's a high ticket buyer. And so you can find that through podcast guesting. All right, you can have a goal to strengthen your authority online. So if you're familiar with SEO, search engine optimization, when you're interviewed on podcasts, you're going to get links back to your website on the podcast show notes page. And the more you're interviewed on podcasts, the more backlinks to your website there will be on the internet, which strengthens your authority online. It makes it so when somebody Googles you, your business, what you do, you will come up onto the first page of Google. People don't go to the second, third, fourth page of Google. Usually, I've never clicked over to page 2 or 3. So if you want people to find you on Google, you need strong SEO, and podcast guesting is a really great way to improve your search engine optimization. Oftentimes, you'll meet all of the goals above that I've just listed. So you can set one clear goal, but oftentimes you'll increase your brand awareness while also generating more warm qualified leads. You're also closing clients, you're getting more higher domain authority, better SEO. But you want to have a clear goal. So we've already asked many of you, if we've messaged with you on LinkedIn or we've emailed you before this masterclass, what are your goals for podcast guesting? But if you haven't yet told me, or even if you have, put it in the chat. What is your goal for podcast guesting? Why do you want to be a guest on podcasts? What would success look like to you? Like, what are the results? What are the goals that you would want to achieve from podcast guesting? So let me know in the chat here on Zoom. I want to know what your goals are. And of course, you can also have an altruistic goal. I think it goes without saying, most of us also want to, serve our audience. We want to provide value. Yes, I want to say it goes without saying, we all share that goal of wanting to provide value to the world, but I'm here to help you grow your business. So let me know what your goal is for your business with podcast guesting. So grow my network, sell services, courses, and books, more exposure, being $1 million real estate producer. Yes, there's so many real estate podcasts. That's a big category for us. Freedom from 9-to-5 job, establish myself as an authority, brand awareness, to grow my own podcast. The number one way to grow your podcast audience or to sell more books is to be a guest on other people's podcasts. That's a perfect goal. Absolutely love it. All right. So you need to have clarity on what you're working towards to know if you're making progress. Okay. So as you're thinking about your goals and getting clarity and just reading through, get some ideas of what other people's goals are. I want to tell you about Jack and Michelle Bosch, who are real estate investors. I was just talking about real estate. When they started working with us about 5 years ago, they were already financially free. They were already running a very successful real estate investment company, but they kind of felt like the best kept secret. Like, they had this incredible company. They were very successful at flipping land, but people didn't really know about them. And so they used podcast appearances to really establish themselves as a thought leader in land flipping and land investing. And so by committing to consistently getting interviewed on podcasts for multiple years, they can now look back and say millions of dollars in sales have come into Orbit Investments they've come into the Land Profit Generator because they've been guesting on podcasts, because they've grown their network with podcast hosts who are influencers, who are leaders. They've created these referral partnerships with podcast hosts who have their target audience listening. So that is just one example of entrepreneurs who came in, had the goal of not being the best kept secret, of generating more warm qualified leads. They've committed to it long term, and they can now attribute millions of dollars from podcast guesting. So, number 2, target audience. You need to know who you are speaking to. You need to know who do you need to speak to in order to meet your goal? So if your goal is to get more clients, who's your ideal client? If your goal is to get more speaking opportunities, who is booking you to speak? Who do you need to be speaking to? If your goal is to sell more books, who is your ideal reader? Who is your target audience? Put that in the chat. I want to know who your target audience is. Who do you need to be speaking to in order to reach your goal? So, as you're putting in the chat, letting me know who your target audience is, I want to tell you about Joe Sullivan. Joe leads a marketing agency that specializes in industrial and manufacturing companies. So, he has a very specific niche where he helps with their marketing. And when he started working with Interview Connections, his goal was to continue building thought leadership and add credibility to his company, which there's another great goal. If you resonate with that, you have a great business and you really want to create thought leadership. His goal was also to humanize his brand. So you may be leading a company. So there's many of you here who are coaches and consultants. You have a personal brand. Podcast guesting is also a great strategy for a company, whether it's an agency or maybe you're an executive in a company and you want a leader, whether it's the CEO or another executive, to be getting out on podcasts to humanize your brand. That's a really good goal. Humanize your brand. His goal was also to generate leads and referrals to his agency. So those were his three goals when he signed up with Interview Connections. And by getting interviewed on the right targeted podcasts relevant to his expertise and niche, he closed a six-figure client from podcast guesting. So podcast guesting is a really great way to secure high ticket clients. And when you have a high ticket service, like Joe has an agency where he can sign a six-figure contract, you can get a really high return on investment through one listener becoming your client. So knowing what your goals are is going to help guide us in knowing what are the right types of podcasts for you to be a guest on. What are your goals? Who are your target audience? And then what are you going to be speaking about? What types of problems do you help your target audience to solve? Mapping out each of these steps, as simple as they might sound, is critical in having success with podcast guesting. A quick note about podcast data. This is a very common, frequently asked question. Podcast listener data is not public. So it's not possible to know the exact demographics of an audience, like what percentage of the audience is female, what percentage of the audience is aged 40 to 50. Like there's no data, not even available to the host of the show. So there's no way to know exactly the demographics of the audience, and there's no data that is public to tell us how many listeners the show has. So do with that information what you will, but it's just not public. So that's okay. Don't waste time and energy trying to figure it out because you won't be able to. But you don't need to know all of that specific information to have success with the strategy. We select podcasts for our clients to be pitched to and to be booked on based off of who the host of the show is, what is their business, who is their target audience, what is the show about, what other topics are they doing episodes on, and then of course the quality factor, like how many episodes have they published, what does their website look like, let's look at their overall online presence and their branding. So you can select shows really effectively without knowing how many listeners the show has or knowing exactly what the demographics of the show is. So just stay focused on what your goals are and what kinds of shows and hosts you need to be connected with to meet your goals. And that is really the key to you having success with podcast guesting. And so, for example, I'm a big fan of examples where it's like there's only like one person makes a huge impact, because this isn't always a volume play where it's like, wow, thousands of people went to my website. That can happen. But it's really fun to look at all these examples where just one person made a huge ripple in your business. Our client, Jonathan Porter Wisman, is a serial entrepreneur and founder. And he told us this great story. He said, one show that I was on caused one of my old friends and clients to reconnect after years of not interacting. He ended up doing a six-figure investment with us and introduced me to a handful of other CEOs and booked me on a stage. One listener, one listener was in the audience of one of the shows we booked Jonathan on, and they invested six figures in his company. They invited him to speak on a stage. They introduced him to all these other CEOs. So you never know who that one person is that's going to make the entire strategy a smashing success. And it does take maturity in business. It takes discipline to not get distracted by the celebrity driven podcasts that you see when you're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook Reels or TikTok and you're like, ooh, that studio looks really cool. Will I be in a studio like that and have millions of people watching me? It's really easy to see that and be like, ooh, like I want to be in that studio getting famous like that person is. But what I am teaching you this week is it's not a vanity play. I'm not here to help you become famous or to give you an ego boost. I'm here to teach you how to use targeted podcast appearances to grow your business and attract more dream clients. So if you want to be famous and you think podcast guesting is the way to do that, I am not your gal. If you want to grow your business and to reach the right target audiences to attract dream clients and build a really solid foundation for your organic marketing strategy, stick with me because I've got over a decade of experience to show you how to use podcasts to do just that. Getting interviewed on 3 to 4 established mid-range shows every single month who each have maybe a few hundred to a few thousand listeners can have a massive impact on your business. And don't just take it from me. I heard Alex Hormozy. Let me know if you're familiar with Alex Hormozy. He has a great podcast called The Game. He's the founder of acquisition.com. I am absolutely a virtual student of Alex Hormozy. He has some genius content. And he said on his podcast that he was getting, for the first 4.5 years of his podcast, he was getting 2,000 to 3,000 downloads per month with 2 episodes per week. So that's about 300 listeners per episode for the first 4.5 years of his show. And he was thrilled with that because what that was for him was that was speaking to an auditorium full of his target audience twice a week. So give me a yes in the chat if you would like to speak to an auditorium full of your target audience every single week, because that is what podcast guesting is giving you, an auditorium full of a very targeted audience who is listening to you speak for 30 to 45 minutes. That is powerful and effective and can do wonders for your business when you do it effectively, consistently, and with the right mindset and attitude, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Mindset and a commitment to be all in. That is my next point. So the strategies, the tactics, the right shows, all super important. If you have a bad mindset and you're doing this all for number one, you will struggle to see results in your business from podcast guesting. Our mentor, we're working with a mentor named Melanie Ann Lair. She's absolutely amazing. She has grown her company to $80 million with no paid ads. She's largely used social media and podcast appearances to grow her company. And she has this saying, I'm telling you about her because her quote that she always says is, for me, for you, for us. And I wanted to quote her directly right here because that is the perfect phrase for what it means to have the correct mindset in podcast guesting. Yes, you're doing this, for me, you're doing it for you because you have a business goal that you want to meet through podcast guesting. You want to get more clients, you want to grow your business. So it is for you, but it also needs to be for the host. It also needs to be for the listeners. And so when you are focusing on for me, for you, for us, it ends up serving you, the audience, the host, and then everyone is getting value. So you can't just go into this for you. You can't just go into it for the host and the listeners, because if you're not also focused on your goal, it's not going to be sustainable. So really have the mindset and a commitment to be all in and to serve everyone at the highest and best good. This is a long-term strategy. So podcasting and podcast guesting is long-term. Let me know I know we've got some podcast hosts. A lot of you are here because you don't want to start your own podcast or you want to start as a guest. But if you are already hosting your own show, let me know in the chat. You could just say like podcast host or me. Let me know in the chat who here is a podcast host. You already have your own show. Okay, great. Yeah, Angeline, Kimberly, Donald, Thomas. So reaffirm for me in the chat, is podcasting a long-term strategy? What was happening with your show a month in, 2 months in, 3 months in? Not so much. When you start a podcast, it takes a little while to really build your audience, to build engagement, to really have the right format and flow. And it is truly the same thing with podcast guesting. It's a long term strategy. It takes time to build up the momentum, to have interviews be consistently booked, recorded, getting published, going live, people hearing them. It takes time for you to hone your message and to nail the stories that you share, to speak so often that you aren't using crutch words every other sentence. That's a skill. If you listen back to your content and you think, I say so much, the hosts aren't going to edit that out for you. You need to practice and get so much experience under your belt that you speak effectively and that you speak with power. That comes from practice. It comes from committing to the strategy long term. So sometimes people will go into podcast guesting and after 40 days or 40 days, 30 to 60 to 90 days, they're like, oh, it didn't work. You may not just be as effective as a podcast guest as you would be if you committed to it for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So this is a long-term strategy. Know that it may not pay off in the first month. It may be a slower burn, but it builds a very strong foundation because unlike paid ads, where when you stop paying Facebook, they stop running your ads. Funny how that works. But when you're a guest on a podcast, that interview gets published and it's up there forever. I mean, there's interviews I've done years and years ago that people could still find. You could still pull up interviews on YouTube that were published 10 years ago. So it builds a very, very strong foundation for your online presence, for your marketing, and it creates this whole library of content that then you can use and share and repurpose. And again, if you want to learn more about repurposing your interviews, apply for the Friday bonus session at interviewconnections.com/Friday. All right. So next, let's talk about your one sheet. So your podcast one sheet. This is the key to standing out as a podcast guest in 2024 and 2025. So like I said, there's probably millions of people that want to be interviewed on podcasts. Podcast hosts get pitched multiple times a week, a day, a month. They're getting tons of people that want to be on their show. And if you don't have a one sheet, they are not going to do work to figure out what your topics are. So let me know if you're a host. If somebody sends you a pitch and they don't have a one sheet, they don't have any suggested topics, they don't have a coherent bio that allows you to get to know them, is there any chance you're going to do extra work to figure out if they're going to be a good fit, or are you going to be on to the next pitch? No. Their host is not going to, you're not going to stand out unless you have a one sheet. And so the podcast one sheet is an asset that I invented. So when I started booking podcast interviews in 2013 for my dad, I created a one-page PDF that quickly showed the host his bio, so something that they could read as an introduction to the show, written in third person. So again, they could read it very quickly and easily. A few topics that they could interview him about, and then some suggested questions that they could ask as if they wrote the questions on their own. So when you have a really great one sheet that you use in your pitches and that you send to podcast hosts before the interview, not only are you being set up for success to have an interview that your ideal clients want to hear, but it makes it really easy for hosts to say, yes, I'd love to have you on the show because clearly I don't even have to do any prep work. You've done it all for me. So this is something that we create for our clients at Interview Connection. So when you work with us in our Amplified Authority program, we make your one sheet for you. We're going to have a special pay in full bonus where if you want us to write your bio topics and questions, that's something that we'll do for you. So book a call at interviewconnections.com/call to learn more about that. And then lastly, you want to have some microphone, like some equipment, right? And we're going to do the giveaway in just a minute. So you want to have a microphone, you want to have AirPods or headphones, just so there's no echo. Really nice lighting because I've done, over 20 interviews this year alone, and every one of them records with video. So you do need to be prepared for video when you're podcast guesting now, usually on Zoom or Riverside, but you want to have really good lighting. You want to have a microphone so you have good sound. You want to have AirPods or, headphones, and then you want to be in a quiet room. And we are going to be, if you sign up with Interview Connections during this masterclass by September 17th, that's going to be one of our gifts. You're going to get all of this equipment, the microphone, the mic stand, the ring light. So book your call at interviewconnections.com/call. And now we're on to the microphone draw. So everyone do a virtual drum roll, because we are now going to announce the winner of the microphone draw. So I have a random name picker up here, and everyone who's registered in the masterclass is in this list. And I'm going to pick a random name. And Jessica Joy Revels is the winner. Is Jessica on Zoom right now? If you aren't here, I will email you. But Jessica, great name. Jessica Joy Revels is the winner. So I will be sure to email and basically, I just need your mailing address, and then I'll send you the microphone. You could have it tomorrow or Wednesday, however fast Amazon gets it to you. So yay! Winner. And then again, we're going to do another draw tomorrow. So there's still a chance to win a free microphone during this masterclass. So congratulations. I'm going to be gifting you the ATR 2100, which is the microphone that I've been using as a podcast guest. It's a dynamic microphone, which is perfect because if you don't have a soundproof studio, which let's face it, most of us don't because we're working in our offices, not a studio, you just have it right in front of your face and it gives you excellent sound quality. So congratulations, Jessica. I'll send you an email to get your address. All right, quick homework just to keep you in action. We do have a free Facebook group. So I'd love for you to go ahead and join our Facebook group at interviewconnections.com/group. It's Guest Expert Profit Lab. That's the name of the group, but the URL interviewconnections.com/group will get you there. Join the Facebook group, and there's a post in there, a homework session 1 post where I'm going to ask for your goals for podcast guesting. Get into the group, comment on that post, and let us know what your goals are. I've also pinned to the top of that group an example of my podcast one sheet. So if you want to see a design example of a podcast one sheet, go into the Facebook group as well. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for session 2. We are going to do another microphone draw tomorrow. So ATR 2100 is the name of the microphone. So come back for session 2 tomorrow for another microphone draw and to learn all about how to monetize your podcast appearances. And again, if you want to learn how to work with Interview Connections, book a consultation call at interviewconnections.com/call. We do have discounts and bonus gifts available to those of you who take action during this masterclass and begin working with us by September 17th. So go to interviewconnections.com/call to book your call. Thank you all so much for being here live. Thank you for watching the replay. So excited. Oh my gosh, William, I love your photo in the chat. Yes, interviewconnections.com/group. We will get that link, but it's Guest Expert Profit Lab is the name of the group. Gabby just put that. ATR 2100 is the microphone that I will be gifting. And that is literally, sorry, the cords are getting caught. I'm not going to keep moving that. That is the microphone that I use. So I personally tested it. I've used it for years. Very loyal to the ATR 2100. All right, we will see you back for session 2 tomorrow. Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you then.